A simple woman books a flight in her billionaire husband's airline. Expanded Part 1. Elena Morgan stared at her laptop screen, the bright blue booking page of Transglobal Airways reflecting in her dark brown eyes. Her finger hovered over the Confirm Purchase button. This wasn't just any flight booking, this was a test, her own little secret mission. 5 years ago, Elena had been just another hard-working woman at a downtown coffee shop, serving lattes and making small talk with customers. That's where she'd met Richard, who came in every morning for a black coffee, no sugar. Back then, he was already wealthy, but not yet the billionaire airline mogul he'd become. She fell in love with him because he treated everyone the same way, with genuine respect and warmth. He'd proposed to her right in that coffee shop, getting down on one knee while other customers cheered. Now their life was different. They lived in a beautiful home overlooking the city. Charity galas, business dinners, and private jets had become normal. But Elena worked hard to stay grounded. She still did her own grocery shopping. She still called her mom every Sunday. And she still remembered what it was like to count pennies for a bus ticket. "Are you sure you don't want to take the private jet?" Richard had asked that morning over breakfast. He was wearing his reading glasses, scrolling through emails on his tablet. Elena shook her head, spreading jam on her toast. "Your pilot, Tom, needs that time for his daughter's recital, remember? Plus, I want to fly commercial, it's been ages." What she didn't tell Richard was that she specifically wanted to fly on Transglobal, the airline his company had acquired just 3 months ago. The airline he was pouring millions into to improve. The airline whose customer service reports he pored over late into the night, trying to understand why passenger satisfaction was dropping. Elena clicked the button. Booking confirmed. A ticket to Sydney in economy class, under her maiden name, Elena Patel. Not a single mention of Morgan anywhere. "You booked your flight?" Richard asked, looking up from his tablet. "All set," Elena replied with a smile. "Sydney, here I come. My sister's going to have the best wedding ever. Let me know your flight details so I can have someone look out for you," Richard said, reaching for his phone. Elena put her hand over his. "No," she said gently. "I want to do this like everyone else. No special treatment." Richard gave her a curious look, but nodded. "You've always been independent. That's one of the things I love about you." Later that evening, Elena sat in their home office reviewing the confirmation email from Transglobal Airways. Flight TA 427, departing at 7:30 a.m. Economy seat, 1 checked bag included. Just like millions of other passengers booked every day, she opened another browser tab and pulled up Transglobal's customer review page. The recent comments made her wince. "Worst flight experience ever. Staff seemed completely overwhelmed. Will never fly with them again." Richard was trying to fix all this. He'd hired new executives, invested in training programs, and was planning a complete overhaul of the service model. But Elena knew something Richard didn't. Sometimes the view from the top didn't show the whole picture. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister Priya in Australia. "Can't wait to see you. How are you getting here? Please tell me my billionaire brother-in-law is sending his private jet." Elena smiled and typed back, "Nope, flying commercial like a normal person. Want to see what it's like to be regular folk again." Priya responded with a laughing emoji and, "You two are so weird, most people would be showing off." That was the thing about Richard and Elena. They had never been about showing off. Richard had built his first tech company from a garage, and even now, with billions in the bank, he drove a 5-year-old car because it still runs fine. Elena had grown up watching her immigrant parents work double shifts to put food on the table. Waste and flashiness simply weren't in their DNA. The week flew by in a blur of preparations. Elena packed light, just 1 suitcase for the 10-day trip. The night before her flight, as she folded her dress for the wedding, Richard came into the bedroom holding a small box. "A little something for the journey," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with their initials engraved on the inside. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. "So you have a piece of home with you," he said. Elena kissed him. "It's perfect." She didn't tell him she'd already removed her diamond wedding ring and replaced it with a plain band. The last thing she wanted was to stand out. Morning came quickly. Richard insisted on driving her to the airport, even though it was barely dawn. You could have sent the driver. Elena yawned as they pulled into the departure lane. And Miss Seeing, you off? Never. Richard squeezed her hand. Text me when you land. And Elena? Yes? If anything isn't right with the flight, let me know. Not as my wife, but as a passenger. I need real feedback. Elena nodded. That's exactly why I'm doing this. They kissed goodbye at the curb. Richard watched until she disappeared through the sliding doors. Just a woman in jeans and a simple jacket, wheeling a standard black suitcase behind her. Inside the terminal, Elena took a deep breath. The airport was already bustling despite the early hour. Business travelers with their laptops, families wrangling excited children, college students with backpacks. This was the real world of air travel, not the private terminal with its plush sofas and personal attendants she'd grown accustomed to. She approached the trans-global check-in counter and joined the economy line. It was long, snaking back and forth between retractable barriers. A harried-looking man in front of her juggled a coffee, a crying toddler, and a crumpled printout of his itinerary. Behind her, two college-aged girls chatted excitedly about their upcoming Australian adventure. First time to Sydney? One asked Elena, noticing her eavesdropping. No, my sister lives there, Elena replied, falling easily into conversation. You're going to love it. Make sure you do the Harbour Bridge climb if you can. This was something she'd missed. These random connections with strangers, these little glimpses into other lives. In her current world, conversations were often carefully calibrated, people always aware of who she was, who her husband was. The line inched forward. Elena watched the check-in staff, noticing their tired smiles, the way they handled frustrated passengers. One attendant, a young woman with a name tag, reading Ling, was training a new employee while simultaneously dealing with the morning rush. Her trans-global uniform looked slightly too large, the company logo a bit faded from washing. When it was finally Elena's turn, Ling gave her a quick professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Passport and booking reference, please, Elena handed them over. Good morning, she said warmly. Ling looked slightly surprised at the friendly greeting but returned it. Good morning. Flying to Sydney today? Yes, for my sister's wedding. Congratulations to her. Ling's fingers flew over the keyboard. Elena Patel, let's get you checked in. Elena watched carefully. The new computer system, one that Richard had mentioned cost millions to implement, seemed to be giving Ling trouble. She frowned at the screen, hit several keys, then tried again. I'm sorry for the delay, she said. The system is running a bit slow today. No problem at all, Elena assured her. A supervisor walked by, glancing at the growing line. Keep it moving, Ling, he said quietly before moving on. Ling's shoulders tensed slightly. She hit a few more keys, then the printer whirred to life. Here we go. You're in seat 32B. That's a middle seat, I'm afraid. The flight is quite full today. Elena took her boarding pass. Middle seat, right in the back of the plane, judging by the number. Exactly what most passengers dreaded. That's fine, Elena said, meaning it. This was precisely the authentic experience she wanted. Your gate is 24. Boarding begins in 1 hour. Ling continued, already looking past Elena to the next customer. Enjoy your flight with Transglobal Airways. As Elena walked away, boarding pass in hand, she couldn't help noticing the flashing alert on Ling's screen that the attendant had missed. A small pop-up about system upgrades scheduled for that night. No wonder things were running slowly. Had Richard been informed about these issues on the front line? Did he know how it affected the staff and consequently the passenger experience? Elena headed toward security, just another face in the crowd. No priority lane today, no escort to whisk her through. Just her and her boarding pass for seat 32B, headed to the other side of the world on her husband's airline. What she would learn on this journey might just change everything. A simple woman books a flight in her billionaire husband's airline, expanded. Part 2. Elena joined the long security line, tucking her boarding pass into her passport. All around her, Travelers shifted impatiently from foot to foot, checking watches and phones. A businessman in front of her sighed loudly, muttering something about being late for his connection. 2 lanes over, a family with small children was struggling to remove shoes and place belongings in plastic bins. This was the real air travel experience, not the private terminal with its express security lane that she'd grown used to over the past few years. Elena found herself oddly enjoying it, observing the small human dramas unfolding around her. When it was her turn, she slipped off her shoes, placed her laptop in a separate bin, and walked through the scanner without issue. The security officer, on the other side, barely glanced at her as he waved her through. "Have a good flight," he said automatically, already looking at the next person. Elena checked her watch. Still an hour before boarding. She decided to get some breakfast, making her way to a crowded cafe near her gate. The prices made her blink. $16 for a yogurt parfait and coffee. She remembered Richard mentioning how airport concessions were a separate business headache altogether. "Highway robbery," said an older woman behind her in line, noticing Elena's reaction to the prices. "But what choice do we have? They've got us captive." Elena smiled at her. "It's pretty steep. I always pack my own snacks now," the woman continued, patting her large purse. "Want a granola bar? I've got plenty." "Oh, no thank you," Elena said, touched by the offer. "But that's very kind." These were the moments that Richard's world of boardrooms and balance sheets couldn't capture. Strangers sharing granola bars, small kindnesses between tired travelers. After eating, Elena walked to gate 24. The seating area was already filling up. She found an empty spot next to a young man with headphones and a college sweatshirt, who was deeply focused on his laptop. The gate agent's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Attention passengers of Transglobal Airways Flight TA427 to Sydney. We regret to inform you that our departure will be delayed by approximately 45 minutes due to a minor mechanical issue. We apologize for any inconvenience." A collective groan rose from the waiting passengers. Elena watched as several people immediately stood up and approached the desk, forming an impromptu line of complaints. The gate agents, 2 young women named Ling, the same one from check-in, Elena noticed, and another with a name tag reading Dana, maintained professional smiles while dealing with increasingly frustrated travelers. "I have a connection in Sydney. Will the plane be safe to fly? This is the 3rd delay I've experienced with your airline." Elena observed how Ling and Dana handled each concern. They were clearly trying their best, but they seemed limited in what they could offer, a fact that was making the passengers even more upset. A man in an expensive suit was particularly vocal. "This is ridiculous. I'm a platinum member, and this is how you treat your best customers. Get me your supervisor." Dana picked up a phone, her smile never wavering though her eyes betrayed her stress. "I'll see if our floor supervisor is available, sir." Elena felt a pang of sympathy for the gate agents. She knew from Richard's late-night conversations that Transglobal was struggling with staffing issues. Part of the reason he'd been so eager to acquire the airline was to fix these problems. 10 minutes later, a floor supervisor arrived. A tall man with graying hair and a badge reading Victor. He spoke quietly with the angry passenger, eventually escorting him away from the desk, presumably to offer some solution in private. When boarding finally began, Elena waited for her group to be called. First came the first-class passengers, then business class, then premium economy. She watched as they breezed through with their carry-ons, some not even making eye contact with the gate agents. Now boarding Group 5, rows 30 through 39, came the announcement. That was her. Elena joined the final boarding group, shuffling forward in the slow-moving line. When she reached the gate, Ling scanned her boarding pass. "Oh, Ms. Patel, you're in seat 32B, Ling said, recognition flickering in her eyes. "The middle seat." "Yes, that's right," Elena replied. Ling hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Just so you know, it's quite crowded back there. We had some overbooking issues. If it's too uncomfortable, let one of the flight attendants know, and they might be able to move you after takeoff if there are any no-shows." "Thank you," Elena said, touched by this small act of kindness from someone who had no idea she was the wife of the company's owner. The jetway was long and slightly stuffy. Elena could feel the excitement and anxiety of travel building around her. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant named Raj greeted passengers with a rehearsed welcome. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," he said to Elena, not quite making eye contact, as he checked her boarding pass. 32B is on the right, about halfway down the aircraft. Elena made her way down the narrow aisle, careful not to bump seated passengers with her small backpack. The business class section looked spacious and comfortable. A few seats were empty, she noticed. Then came premium economy, also not completely full. But as she continued toward the back, the aircraft became more crowded. By the time she reached row 32, the overhead bins were already packed. A flight attendant named Priya was helping an elderly couple stow their bags. "Excuse me?" Elena said to the passenger in the aisle seat of row 32. A large man with headphones looked up, sighed audibly, and stood to let her in. Elena squeezed past him, settled into her middle seat, and tucked her backpack under the seat in front. To her right, a teenage girl was already asleep against the window, a neck pillow propping her head. The space was tight, much tighter than Elena had experienced in years. Her knees nearly touched the seat in front, and both armrests were already claimed by her seatmates. This would be a long 14-hour flight. As the last passengers boarded, Elena noticed the flight attendants counting heads and checking the passenger list. One of them, an older woman with short gray hair whose name tag read Helen, seemed concerned. She conferred with Raj, pointing at something on her tablet. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Lee speaking. Welcome aboard Transglobal Airways Flight TA-4227 to Sydney. Our flight time today will be approximately 14 hours and 20 minutes. We're just waiting for the final paperwork from ground crew, and then we'll be on our way. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure." Elena pulled out the safety card and studied it, something she hadn't done in years. The man next to her had already closed his eyes, clearly a seasoned traveler who planned to sleep through as much of the flight as possible. As the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Elena noticed that Helen was still looking troubled, now checking something on the passenger manifest while discreetly speaking into her handheld phone. Her eyes scanned the economy cabin, perhaps looking for someone specific. The plane pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway. Elena felt a familiar flutter of excitement. Despite all her travels, takeoff still gave her a thrill. As they waited in the takeoff queue, Helen appeared in the aisle near Elena's row. She seemed to be checking seat numbers against her list. When she reached row 32, she glanced at Elena, then at her tablet, then back at Elena again. There was a moment of hesitation, a slight narrowing of eyes, but then another flight attendant called Helen from the front of the cabin, and she moved away without saying anything. Had she recognized Elena? It seemed unlikely. Elena had been careful to dress simply, wear minimal makeup, and style her hair differently than she did for public appearances with Richard. Besides, the cabin was dimly lit as they prepared for takeoff. The engines roared, and the plane accelerated down the runway. Elena felt the familiar push back into her seat as the aircraft lifted into the air. Beside her, the teenage girl stirred, briefly but didn't wake. The man on her other side adjusted his headphones and shifted away from her, creating as much space as possible in the cramped row. An hour into the flight, the seatbelt sign finally dinged off. Flight attendants began preparing the drink service. Elena opened the in-flight magazine, flipping to the route map. She noticed several changes Richard had implemented, new destinations, updated fleet information. But the passenger experience itself seemed unchanged from what she remembered of economy travel before her marriage. Her entertainment screen flickered, then went black. Elena pressed the power button, but nothing happened. She tried again, then noticed that several other screens in nearby rows were also malfunctioning. A wave of frustration rippled through the economy cabin. Priya came by with the drink cart. "What would you like to drink?" she asked Elena. "Water, please. Also, my screen isn't working." Priya poured water into a plastic cup. "I'm sorry about that. We've been having issues with the entertainment system in this section. Engineering knows about it. I can try resetting it after the service." "Thank you," Elena said, accepting the water. No ice, she noticed, though she hadn't been asked about her preference. As Priya moved on, Elena overheard another passenger complaining about the same issue. "This is ridiculous. I paid all this money and can't even watch a movie?" Priya's response was sympathetic but offered no real solution. "I understand, sir. Unfortunately, it's a system-wide issue in rows 30-35. We're doing our best." Elena sipped her water and thought about what Richard would make of all this. He'd been so excited about implementing the new entertainment systems fleet-wide, but clearly, there were bugs that needed fixing. While everyone else was focused on the drink service, Elena noticed Helen in the galley, looking at her tablet again. This time she was showing something to another flight attendant and pointing toward the economy cabin. Their expressions were concerned, even slightly alarmed. Elena turned away quickly when Helen looked in her direction. Something was happening, and she had a growing suspicion it might involve her. Had someone recognized her after all? Was there a problem with her booking? Or was it something else entirely? The mystery deepened when Helen made her way down the aisle again, this time with a deliberate pace. She stopped at row 32. "Ms. Patel?" Helen asked quietly. Elena looked up, trying to appear casual. "Yes?" Helen hesitated, glancing at her tablet once more. "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" Elena reached into her pocket and produced it. Helen studied it, then looked at Elena's face more carefully. There was a flash of recognition in her eyes, quickly masked by professionalism. "Thank you," Helen said, returning the boarding pass. "Enjoy your flight." As Helen walked away, Elena couldn't help wondering if her cover had been blown. The real question was, what would happen next? 3 hours into the flight, Elena shifted uncomfortably in her middle seat. The initial excitement of her undercover journey was wearing off. Replaced by the reality of long-haul economy travel, her right shoulder brushed against the sleeping teenager by the window, while on her left, the large man had claimed the entire armrest, leaving Elena with nowhere to rest her elbow. The cabin lights had been dimmed to help passengers adjust to the time change. Most people around her were either sleeping or watching movies on functioning screens, unlike her own black monitor that remained stubbornly dead despite Priya's attempts to reset it. Elena took out her phone and opened her notes app. She began typing observations about her experience so far. Check-in. Staff seemed rushed. Minimal eye contact boarding. Crowded, slow, little guidance. Seat. Tight space. Broken entertainment system service. Basic but polite. No solutions for problems. Richard would want details, not just complaints. He always said that fixing a business required understanding exactly where things went wrong. A light patch of turbulence jostled the cabin. The sleeping teenager stirred but didn't wake. The captain's voice came over the intercom asking flight attendants to take their seats temporarily. Elena put away her phone and closed her eyes, trying to get comfortable. She thought about Richard. By now, he would be in his morning meeting, perhaps wondering how her flight was going. She had promised to text when she landed, still more than 10 hours away. Would he check the flight status? Would he be tempted to call someone at the airline to make sure she was okay? The turbulence subsided, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Elena decided to stretch her legs. She gently tapped the arm of the man beside her, who reluctantly removed his headphones. "Sorry, I need to get out," she said. With a barely concealed sigh, he stood to let her pass. Elena squeezed into the narrow aisle and made her way toward the rear lavatory. The back of the plane was quieter, with a small group of flight attendants gathered in the galley area, preparing the next meal service. Helen and Raj were speaking in hushed tones while organizing trays. They fell silent when they noticed Elena approaching. "Excuse me," Elena said. "Are the lavatories open?" "Yes, 2 on the right are available," Raj replied with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As Elena waited for a free lavatory, she couldn't help overhearing their resumed conversation. "Sartik the manifest 3 times, Helen was saying. "The name is different, but I'm almost certain." "We can't just assume," Raj interrupted. "If you're wrong, it would be incredibly embarrassing for everyone." But if I'm right and we didn't... They noticed Elena again and fell silent once more. Helen busied herself with the meal carts while Raj moved toward the front of the cabin. In the tiny lavatory, Elena splashed water on her face and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Did she really look so different without her usual styling? Surely the airline staff had photos of her somewhere. She'd attended company events with Richard, but she had been careful to book under her maiden name and use a personal email address. When she returned to her seat, the meal service had begun. The aroma of reheated food filled the cabin as flight attendants rolled carts down the aisles. Elena's stomach grumbled. She hadn't eaten since the overpriced airport yogurt. Priya reached row 32 with her cart. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked the man beside Elena. "Chicken," he replied without looking up from his phone. "And for you?" Priya turned to Elena. "What's in the pasta?" "It's a vegetable penne with tomato sauce," Priya answered, already reaching for the chicken tray, assuming Elena's choice. "I'll try the pasta, please," Elena said. Priya's hand hesitated, then moved to the pasta section of her cart. She frowned, slightly. "I'm sorry, it seems we've run out of the pasta option in this section. Would chicken be okay?" Elena nodded, accepting the tray. As Priya moved on to the next row, Elena noticed that the business class cabin was receiving a completely different meal service. The flight attendants there were laying out white cloths on trays and offering multiple entree choices with real glassware. The contrast was striking. Richard had mentioned upgrading the economy meal service, but clearly that hadn't happened yet. Elena examined her meal. A small portion of dry-looking chicken, overcooked vegetables, and a side of potato that might have been mashed at some point. A packaged brownie and plastic cup of water completed the offering. She took a bite of the chicken and tried not to wince. It wasn't terrible, just institutional. The kind of food designed to be mass-produced and reheated, not enjoyed. Around her, other passengers were having similar reactions. A woman across the aisle pushed her tray away after 2 bites. A man in front asked for extra bread only to be told there was none left. "First time flying transglobal?" the teenager beside her asked, finally awake and picking at her own meal. "It's been a while," Elena replied. "My dad says they used to be really good, but lately they've gone downhill. Something about new ownership." The girl shrugged. "I just wish the screens worked. 14 hours is a long time to stare at the seat in front." Elena nodded sympathetically. "Have you tried asking for something to read?" The teenager looked surprised. "Do they have that?" "They should have magazines or newspapers somewhere." The girl pressed her call button. Moments later, Helen appeared. "Can I help you?" "Do you have any magazines or something?" the teenager asked. Helen seemed caught off guard. "I'll check what we have available," she said, disappearing toward the galley. She returned with 2 dog-eared magazines, a 6-month-old travel publication and a business magazine. The teenager took the travel magazine with a thank you, while Helen handed the business one to Elena with an odd look. "You might find this interesting," she said meaningfully. Elena glanced down at the cover and froze. There, on the front page, was Richard, standing in front of a transglobal airplane with the headline, "Morgan's Mission: Can This Tech Billionaire Transform Air Travel?" And in the corner, a smaller photo of Richard and Elena at a charity gala. Elena quickly closed the magazine and slipped it into her seat pocket, her heart pounding. Had Helen given her this deliberately? The coincidence seemed too perfect. The meal service concluded and the cabin fell into the quiet rhythm of long-haul flight. Trays were collected, lights dimmed further, and passengers settled in for the long night ahead. Without a working screen, Elena had little to do but think and observe. She pulled out the magazine again, opening it to a random page to avoid the cover. Unfortunately, she found herself looking at a full-page photo of herself and Richard at the transglobal acquisition announcement. The caption read, "Power couple Richard and Elena Morgan at the press conference announcing Morgan Tech's acquisition of Transglobal Airways." Elena quickly flipped the page, but not before catching Helen watching her from the galley. Their eyes met briefly before Helen turned away, whispering something to Raj. Half an hour later, as Elena was trying to get comfortable, enough to sleep Victor, the floor supervisor she had seen at the gate appeared beside her row. He leaned down slightly, speaking in a low voice. Ms. Patel, I wonder if I might have a word with you in private? Elena felt a mix of alarm and resignation. Is something wrong? Not at all, Victor assured her with a polite smile. Just a matter regarding your booking. If you could follow me? The man beside her stood with another sigh to let her out. Elena followed Victor toward the front of the plane, conscious of curious eyes tracking their movement up the aisle. Instead of stopping at the galley, Victor led her through the premium economy section and into business class. The difference was striking. Wider seats, more space, passengers sleeping comfortably under actual blankets rather than the paper-thin coverings provided in economy. Victor stopped at an empty business class seat by the window. Ms. Patel, or perhaps I should say Mrs. Morgan, we believe there may have been a mix-up with your booking. So they had figured it out. Elena considered denying it, but decided against it. I booked exactly the seat I wanted, she said quietly. Victor looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, we're deeply sorry for the confusion. Had we known it was you on the manifest, that was the point, Elena interrupted gently. I wanted to experience the airline as a regular passenger would. Understanding dawned on Victor's face. I see. Even so, we can't have you in economy. For the remainder of the flight, it wouldn't be appropriate. Why not? Elena challenged. Hundreds of other passengers are making do. Yes, but they're not. Victor stopped himself. What I mean is, we have a responsibility to provide our best service to all passengers, and in your case, in my case, Elena finished for him, you recognized me, and now you want to give me special treatment. Victor shifted his weight uncomfortably. Perhaps we could compromise. This business class seat is empty for the duration of the flight. You could have a more comfortable journey, and we could speak privately about your observations so far. Elena considered the offer. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle, to complete the economy experience she had set out to document. But another part recognized the opportunity this presented, a chance to speak openly with management about what she had observed. I'll move on one condition, she said finally. I want a complete report on why my entertainment system and those around it weren't working, how many meals ran out before service was complete, and what happened with the boarding process today. Victor blinked, then nodded slowly. I'll have that for you before we land. And one more thing, Elena added. Don't tell the crew who I am. Let them figure it out if they haven't already. As you wish, Ms. Patel. As Victor helped her settle into the spacious business class seat, Elena couldn't help feeling she had compromised her mission. But perhaps this too was valuable information for Richard. How quickly the airline identified a VIP passenger and how they handled the situation. She reclined her new seat, testing the controls. The screen here worked perfectly, offering hundreds of movies and TV shows. A flight attendant immediately appeared with a hot towel and a glass of water. Can I get you anything else? The attendant asked. No, thank you, Elena replied, suddenly exhausted. Just some rest. As the attendant walked away, Elena noticed Helen watching from the curtain dividing the cabins. Their eyes met again, and this time Helen gave a small, knowing nod before disappearing back into economy. Elena woke to the gentle touch of sunlight streaming through a half-opened window shade. For a moment, she was disoriented. The comfortable seat, the actual blanket covering her legs, the smell of fresh coffee. This wasn't the cramped economy seat she had fallen asleep in. Then she remembered. Her cover had been blown. She was now in business class, her undercover mission compromised but not entirely ruined. She still had her notes and observations from those first crucial hours. A flight attendant noticed she was awake and approached with a warm smile. Good morning, Ms. Patel. Would you like some breakfast? We have a Western option with eggs and bacon or a continental with fresh fruit and pastries. Elena chose the continental breakfast and a cup of coffee. As the attendant walked away, Elena checked her watch. They were about 5 hours from Sydney, which meant she had slept for nearly 6 hours, far longer than would have been possible in her original seat. She pulled out her phone and added more notes. Dramatic difference in comfort between cabins business, class, attentive service, multiple meal options, economy, basic service, limited options, ran out of choices. Staff seemed stressed, understaffed. While eating her breakfast, which was genuinely delicious with fresh berries and still warm croissants, Elena observed the business class cabin more carefully. There were several empty seats, despite the full flight that had been announced. Meanwhile, economy had been packed to capacity, with passengers crammed into every available space. Victor appeared at her side, tablet in hand. "Good morning, Miss Patel. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I would have in 32B, Elena admitted. "I have that report you requested," Victor said, handing her the tablet. "It's preliminary, but it covers the issues you mentioned." Elena scrolled through the document. According to the report, the entertainment system outage affected rows 30-36 due to a software update that had failed to install properly the night before. The catering had been short-loaded. They had received fewer meals than ordered, particularly the pasta option. And the boarding delays were attributed to staff shortages at the gate. All issues that could have been prevented with better systems and management, exactly the kinds of problems Richard had vowed to fix when he acquired the Airline. "Thank you," she said, returning the tablet. "This is helpful." "Mrs. Morgan," Victor began, then caught himself. "Ms. Patel, I hope you understand that these issues aren't representative of the service we strive to provide. But they are representative of the service that most passengers received yesterday," Elena pointed out gently. Victor nodded, his professional facade cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern. "Yes, you're right. And it's frustrating for those of us who want to do better." "Tell me more about that," Elena encouraged. Victor glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then sat in the empty seat across the aisle. "The truth is, we've been in a difficult transition period. The new ownership has promised changes, but on the front lines we haven't seen much difference yet. If anything, there's more pressure, but the same old problems." "What kind of problems?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. "Staffing is the biggest one. We're stretched thin at every level. Gate agents, flight attendants, maintenance crews. The new booking system was supposed to help, but it's created its own issues. And morale." He shook his head. "Let's just say it's been better." "I appreciate your honesty," Elena said. "And I'm sure my husband would too." Victor's eyes widened slightly at her open acknowledgement of her identity. I hope I haven't spoken out of turn." "Not at all. This is exactly what I wanted to learn." Elena smiled reassuringly. "Tell me, do the other crew members know who I am?" "Helen and Raj have their suspicions. The others, I don't think so." "Good. Let's keep it that way for now." After Victor left, Elena reflected on their conversation. Richard had been so focused on the big picture, fleet upgrades, route expansions, technology improvements, that perhaps he had missed the human element. The people who made the airline function day to day were struggling, and that directly affected the passenger experience. An hour later, Helen appeared with a fresh pot of coffee. As she refilled Elena's cup, she spoke in a low voice. "I recognized you from the magazine," she said. "But I wasn't sure until Victor moved you up here." Elena decided to be direct. "I'd rather the rest of the crew didn't know." Helen nodded. "Your secret's safe with me. But can I ask why? Why fly economy under your maiden name when you could have had all this from the start?" It was a fair question. Elena considered her answer carefully. "Because I wanted to see the real experience, not what happens when everyone knows the boss's wife is watching." Helen's expression softened with understanding. "That's actually very cool of you. Most people in your position wouldn't bother." "My position isn't what defines me," Elena said. "Before I met Richard, I was just a coffee shop worker trying to make rent. I haven't forgotten what it's like to be on the other side." Helen seemed to appreciate this. "Well, for what it's worth, I hope whatever you tell your husband helps. We could use some real changes around here." "What would you change first?" Elena asked, curious about the perspective of someone who worked the flights every day. Helen thought for a moment. "Honestly, Communication. Half our problems come from departments not talking to each other. Catering doesn't know about last-minute passenger changes. Gate agents don't get updated about delays until passengers are already asking questions they can't answer. Flight attendants aren't told about system issues until we're trying to help frustrated passengers. That makes a lot of sense, Elena said, making a mental note. And maybe... Helen hesitated. Go on, Elena encouraged. Maybe your husband could try flying economy himself sometime. Just once. It might help him understand why some of these issues matter so much to regular people. Elena smiled. I'll suggest it, though I might have to book it for him the way I did for myself. Helen returned the smile and moved on to serve other passengers. Elena looked out the window at the endless expanse of Pacific Ocean below, thinking about everything she'd learned so far. The flight tracking map showed they were passing over Fiji. Not long now, until Sydney. Elena felt a pang of guilt for abandoning her economy seat neighbors. She wondered how the teenage girl was doing without entertainment, how the large man was coping with the cramped space for 14 hours. She decided to take a walk back to economy, just to see how things were going. As she passed through premium, economy, the contrast between cabins became even more apparent. The further back she went, the more crowded, warm, and stuffy it became. In economy, the lights were now fully on. Flight attendants were serving a pre-arrival snack, a small sandwich, and a cookie. Most passengers looked tired and rumpled after the long night flight. Elena spotted her former row. The large man was asleep, mouth open, while the teenage girl was reading the travel magazine Helen had provided. Raj was working the aisle, collecting trash. He did a double take when he saw Elena. Ms. Patel, did you need something? Just stretching my legs, she replied. How are things back here? Raj glanced around before answering. Honestly, we're managing, but it's been a challenging flight. The entertainment system issue affected more passengers than we initially thought, and we've had a few unhappy customers. As if on cue, a call button chimed a few rows away. A middle-aged woman was trying to get attention, waving impatiently. Excuse me, Raj said, moving to address the passenger's concerns. Elena watched as he patiently explained something to the clearly dissatisfied woman. Despite the woman's increasing agitation, Raj maintained his professional demeanor, though Elena could see the strain in his forced smile. When he returned, Elena asked, Does that happen often? More than it used to, Raj admitted. People expect more these days, especially with what they're paying for tickets. And when things go wrong like today, they take it out on you, Elena finished. It's part of the job. Raj shrugged. But yes, it wears on you after a while. Elena thought about the empty business class seats, the overbooked economy section, the exhausted staff trying to make it all work. There was a disconnect here that went beyond operational issues. As she made her way back to business class, Elena passed the galley where Priya and another flight attendant were preparing for landing. They were discussing plans for their layover. In Sydney, I'm just going to sleep for the entire 24 hours, the other attendant was saying. This back-to-back scheduling is killing me. I know, Priya agreed. Third long haul this week. I barely see my kids anymore. Elena slowed her pace, listening. Did you see the new schedule for next month? Priya continued. Even less recovery time between flights. I don't know how they expect us to maintain service standards when we're running on fumes. Well, the new owner doesn't care about that, her colleague replied bitterly. He's all about efficiency and cutting costs. Probably never set foot in economy class in his life. Elena winced at the unfair characterization of Richard, but she understood the sentiment behind it. To these employees, the new ownership represented just another round of corporate decisions that made their already challenging jobs harder. Back in her business class seat, Elena pulled out her phone again, adding more observations. Staff overworked. Stretched thin communication breakdown between departments, morale issues affecting service-empty premium seats, while economy overbooked crew feels disconnected from management decisions. The captain announced their initial descent into Sydney. Flight attendants began preparing the cabin for landing, checking seat belts and collecting final items. Victor stopped by Elena's seat one last time. "I hope the rest of your flight has been more comfortable, Ms. Patel," he said. "And I want to assure you that we'll address the issues from your report." "Thank you, Victor. But I have a question." "Yes?" "Those empty seats here in business class, why weren't passengers from the overbooked economy section offered upgrades?" Victor looked uncomfortable. "That's not my decision to make. The revenue management team sets strict policies about upgrades. Even when it would improve the experience for everyone, ease the crowding in economy, make use of empty premium seats, create goodwill with customers? As I said, those decisions come from above my pay grade," Victor replied diplomatically. "But it's a valid point." As the plane began its final approach into Sydney, Elena looked out at the iconic harbor coming into view. The Opera House gleamed in the morning sun, and the harbor bridge stretched across the sparkling water. It was a beautiful sight, but Elena's mind was elsewhere. She was already composing the conversation she would have with Richard. This flight had revealed so much, not just about the airline's operational issues, but about the human cost of business decisions made in boardrooms far removed from the actual experience of employees and customers. The wheels touched down on Australian soil with a gentle bump. As the plane taxied to the gate, Elena's phone reconnected to the network. A message from Richard appeared. "Landed yet? How was the flight?" Elena smiled to herself. Her husband had no idea what was coming. She typed a simple reply. "Just landed. We need to talk about your airline." The seatbelt sign dinged off for the final time. As passengers stood to retrieve their belongings, Elena remained seated, watching the choreographed chaos of arrival. In economy, people were crammed in the aisles, reaching for overhead bins, anxious to deplane after the long journey. In business, class passengers calmly collected their things, no rush, no stress, two different worlds on the same aircraft, and Elena had seen both. As she finally stood to leave, Helen caught her eye from the doorway and gave her a small nod of respect. Elena nodded back. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. Flying would never be the same again. Not for her, and if she had anything to say about it, not for Transglobal Airways either. Elena's sister Priya was waiting at the arrival gate, bouncing excitedly on her toes as passengers streamed into the terminal. When she spotted Elena, she rushed forward with open arms. "There you are. I've been tracking your flight," Priya exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "Why aren't you answering your phone? I sent like 10 messages after you landed." "Sorry, it's been a bit crazy," Elena said, returning the hug. "It's so good to see you." Priya stepped back, examining her sister with narrowed eyes. "You look exhausted. Was the flight that bad?" "It was educational," Elena replied with a small smile. As they walked toward baggage claim, Priya continued to chatter excitedly about wedding plans and family members who had already arrived. Elena listened, but part of her mind was still processing everything she had experienced on the flight. "Hello? Earth to Elena?" Priya waved a hand in front of her face. "You're totally zoned out. Did something happen on the plane?" Elena sighed. "Remember how I said I was flying commercial to experience Richard's airline as a normal passenger?" "Yeah, your weird undercover boss thing. Did it work?" "Too well. I learned a lot, but I also got caught." Priya's eyes widened. "No way. How?" "A flight attendant recognized me from a magazine. I ended up getting moved to business class halfway through." "That's hilarious," Priya laughed. "So much for your experiment. But at least you got to be comfortable for part of the flight." "That's not the point," Elena said, a hint of frustration in her voice. "The airline has serious problems, Priya. The economy section was overbooked and uncomfortable. The entertainment system was broken. They ran out of meal options, and the staff is clearly overworked and stressed." Priya's smile faded. "Oh, that does sound bad. What are you going to tell Richard?" "Everything. He needs to know what's really happening." They collected Elena's suitcase and headed toward the parking garage. As they walked, Elena's phone rang. Richard's face lit up the screen. "Speaking of..." Elena showed the phone to Priya before answering. "Hi, honey?" "Elena, I've been waiting to hear from you." Richard's voice was warm with relief. How was the flight? Did you make it to Priya's okay? I'm with her now. The flight was interesting. We need to talk about it, but not over the phone. That doesn't sound good, Richard said, immediately picking up on her tone. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. But your airline needs work, Richard. A lot of work. There was a pause on the other end. Tell me. Not now. It's too much for a quick call. I'll send you some notes tonight and we can video chat tomorrow. That's serious, huh? Richard sounded concerned. All right, I'll wait. Give Priya my love. And Elena, thank you for doing this. I know it wasn't exactly a fun way to spend 14 hours. It was worth it, Elena said, meaning it. I love you. Talk tomorrow. After hanging up, Elena climbed into Priya's car, finally allowing herself to feel the full exhaustion of the journey. You're really going to shake things up, aren't you? Priya asked as she navigated out of the airport. Someone has to, Elena replied, watching Sydney's skyline come into view. That night, after a warm shower and dinner with Priya's fiancé and family, Elena sat down with her laptop. She organized all her notes and observations into a comprehensive document for Richard, adding recommendations based on her conversations with the crew. When she finished, it was nearly midnight. She sent the document to Richard with a simple message. Read this before our call tomorrow. Love you. Then she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, Elena woke to several messages from Richard, sent throughout the night as he read her report. Just started reading. This is eye-opening. The entertainment system failures are unacceptable. Already emailed tech. Empty business seats while economy is overbooked. Revenue management and I need to talk. The staffing issues are worse than I realized. No wonder morale is low. Can we talk as soon as you wake up? This can't wait. Elena smiled at his urgency. This was why she loved him. When presented with a problem, he didn't make excuses. He took action. She video called him over breakfast, Priya tactfully giving her privacy by heading out for wedding errands. Richard's face appeared on screen, his expression serious. He looked like he hadn't slept much. Elena, your report was brutal, but exactly what I needed to see. I tried to be thorough, she said. You were. And I've already started making changes. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena recognized as his thinking mode. The systems issues should have been caught before the flight. The catering shortfall is inexcusable, and the staffing problems. That's the biggest issue, Elena cut in. The crew is stretched too thin. They're exhausted, Richard. They're doing their best, but they can't keep up with the demands being placed on them. I know, I've been looking at the scheduling system all morning. It's a mess. Richard shook his head. The previous management was cutting corners everywhere to save costs. And what about the empty business class seats? Why not upgrade some economy passengers when the flight is overbooked? It would create so much goodwill. Richard nodded. Revenue management has been against it, saying it devalues the premium experience. But I think they're wrong. I'm changing that policy today. They talked for nearly an hour, diving deep into every aspect of Elena's experience. Richard took notes, asked questions, and outlined immediate changes he planned to implement. There's one more thing, Elena said toward the end of their call. The staff feels disconnected from management. They think you don't understand their challenges because you've never experienced them firsthand. Richard was quiet for a moment. They're right, he finally admitted. I've been approaching this too much like a tech problem to solve, not a human experience to improve. So what are you going to do about it? A slow smile spread across Richard's face. I think it's time for me to take a flight in economy class. 2 weeks later, Elena stood beside Richard in Sydney Airport, preparing to board their return flight to the United States. In the time she had been in Australia, celebrating her sister's beautiful wedding and enjoying family time, Richard had been busy revolutionizing Transglobal Airways. Are you sure about this? Elena asked as they approached the check-in counter. We could still use the private jet. Richard adjusted his baseball cap, part of his own undercover boss disguise. Absolutely sure. If I'm going to fix this airline, I need to experience it like our customers do. They had booked 2 economy seats under Richard's mother's maiden name. No special treatment, no upgrades, no exceptions. Just 2 normal passengers on a 14-hour flight. At the check-in counter, they were greeted by a young man whose name tag read Alex. Elena noticed something different immediately. Alex made eye contact, smiled genuinely, and seemed less rushed than Ling had been 2 weeks prior. "Good morning. How are you both today?" Alex asked, his energy positive but not forced. "We're good, thanks," Richard replied, handing over their passports and booking information. Alex typed efficiently, then looked up with an apologetic expression. "I see you're seated in row 34, which is toward the back of the aircraft. Would you prefer seats closer to the front? We have some available in row 20. Elena exchanged a surprised look with Richard. This kind of proactive service hadn't been offered on her previous flight. "That would be great," Richard said. "Thank you." "Perfect. I've moved you both to 20A and 20B, that's a window and middle seat. Also, I noticed your entertainment system. Preferences weren't set in your booking. Would you like to select your movie options now, or would you prefer to browse on board?" Another new feature, Elena realized. Richard's eyes sparkled with recognition of his own implemented changes. "We'll browse on board," Elena said. "No problem. And just so you know, we've expanded our meal options on this flight. You'll have a choice of 3 entrees instead of 2, and special dietary needs can be accommodated if you let us know now." As they completed check-in and headed toward security, Richard squeezed Elena's hand. "Hear that? 3 meal options instead of 2. That was directly from your suggestion about running out of choices." The improvements continued throughout their journey. Security lines moved more efficiently. Boarding was organized by smaller groups, reducing congestion in the aisles. Once seated, they found the economy cabin noticeably less cramped. Richard had removed 2 rows of seats throughout the fleet, giving everyone slightly more legroom. The entertainment systems worked flawlessly. The meal service included not just more options, but better quality food. And most noticeably, the crew seemed different, more energetic, less stressed, more engaged with passengers. "What did you do with the staffing?" Elena whispered halfway through the flight, after watching a flight attendant spend extra time helping an elderly passenger find comfortable headphones. "Increased crew numbers by 20% on all long-haul flights," Richard replied. "Reduced consecutive flight hours. Added mandatory recovery days between international trips. It costs more, but the improvement in service is worth it. And the crew knows about these changes. They helped design them. After reading your report, I assembled a task force of frontline staff, flight attendants, gate agents, pilots. I asked them what needed fixing, then actually listened." Elena smiled, proudly. "So that's why everyone seems happier. That and the profit-sharing program I announced last week. If the airline does well, everyone benefits, not just executives." As they began their descent into their home city, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. And I'd like to thank you all for choosing Transglobal Airways today. We know you have choices when you fly, and we're working hard to be your first choice every time." Richard raised an eyebrow at Elena. "That's new too. More genuine, less corporate speak." "It's working," Elena said, nodding toward a passenger across the aisle who was filling out a comment card with what appeared to be positive feedback. After landing, as they waited for their luggage, a news alert popped up on Richard's phone. He showed it to Elena with a grin. "Customer satisfaction soars at Transglobal Airways," the headline read. "Industry analysts surprised by rapid turnaround." Elena read the first paragraph. Just 1 month after implementing sweeping changes, Transglobal Airways is reporting a 40% increase in customer satisfaction scores, moving from near the bottom of industry rankings to the top 5. Industry experts are calling it one of the most dramatic turnarounds in aviation history. "Not bad for 4 weeks of work," Elena said, nudging Richard playfully. "I had good intelligence," he replied, putting an arm around her. "From my undercover agent." As they walked out of the airport, another passenger from their flight hurried past, then stopped and turned back. "Excuse me," the woman said, looking at Richard. Aren't you Richard Morgan, the guy who owns Transglobal? Richard hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I am. The woman broke into a smile. I just wanted to say thank you. I fly this route 4 times a year, and this was by far the best experience I've ever had. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Thank you, Richard said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. After the woman left, Elena squeezed his hand. See? It's working. All because my wife was willing to sit in seat 32B and take notes, Richard said. Best market research I've ever had. Elena laughed. Maybe next time we should try flying with our toddler. That would give you a whole new perspective on air travel. Richard's eyes widened in mock horror. One undercover mission at a time, please. As they walked to their car, Elena reflected on how a simple flight booking had turned into something so significant. A small choice, to experience life as an ordinary person, had created a wave of positive change affecting thousands. Sometimes, she thought, the most powerful perspective is the most basic one, seeing the world through the eyes of those you serve. It was a lesson she hoped Richard would carry forward, not just in his airline, but in all his future ventures. And maybe, just maybe, other business leaders would learn from their example